Guys, lack is not a real thing. God is real. Every time the enemy tries to use your fear against you, you have to know when you get to the other side, how beautiful the trees will be, how beautiful the lake will be, how beautiful when you get to the other side of this thing, this isolation island that the enemy has placed you on, or your pride has put you there, but the enemy kept you there. You have to realize that you can't stay there forever. And so I today just want to tell a story about, avoidance. And we're going to talk about Jacob and the children that Jacob had, the children of Israel. And we're going to talk about Joseph. The thing about Jacob is when his life was filled with swift decisions followed by actions, they would disrupt the normal. They would disrupt what was consistent. Now, he still remained focused and he always locked in. Consistent focus on the Lord and attention to his word with obedience to his word makes you follow that purpose. And he had that obligation and he did what Isaac told him to do. See, when he was coming up, Esau had married women that were ungodly, but the region that they were in, they just were harsh. They were cruel to his mother and to his father. And so Rebecca tells Jacob to marry a woman among their family, not directly in the family, but some cousins far off. So that's what he did. And he eventually became more powerful after the struggle that he had with God and man. He eventually became more worthy. Like I'm not gonna say he earned grace, because you can't earn grace, but he eventually started to become the man that God was turning him into this whole time. So not just his elders, but his own sons did things that were just, undermining his authority. His understanding of God just came swiftly. His understanding of God, when you have a download or you receive the word by faith, it does take you up, kind of like how they say in the Bible, the Spirit takes you up and you don't know where the Spirit's going to go next. Okay, so was what it was. Now, when he dreamt of the ladder in Genesis 18, the angels were ascending and descending, and the promise was revealed to him. He knew that God was there with him and going to be with him perpetually. He named the area where he had the vision Bethel, and he built an altar there. From this moment on, he established the vision God gave him as fact. Having that faith to believe gives you so much confidence in the Lord. To trust in him when he speaks, and even know that all of the things he tells you stems from the love and his will. He both knew of the love of God, and yet he witnessed that there were so much more things of God that he knew that he could not witness at this time. It's like once you see what you are allowed to see, you realize you don't have access to everything except for what God wants you to see, and that's great things. And he could not place his finger on or even understand just everything. It's just like he's unsearchable. So there's things about the Lord that are just like vastly something we can't even conceive with our mind, because our ways are not his ways. And he says, surely God is in this place. This is not the only time that we understand what God is doing and that God is everywhere. If you go to Ezekiel 48, okay, there is a city called Yahweh Shema. The Lord is there. It's in Ezekiel 48. I'll just read a couple scriptures. These are the tribes listed by name. At the northern frontier, Dan will have one portion. It will follow the headline road to Labo Hamath. Hazar Enon, and the northern border of Damascus next to Hamath will be part of its border from the east side to the west. Asher will have one portion. It will border the territory of Dan from east to west. Naphtali will have one portion. It will border the territory of Asher from east to west. Manasseh will have one portion. It will border the territory of Naphtali from east to west. Ephraim will have one portion. It will border the territory of Manasseh from east to west. Reuben will have one portion. It will border the territory of Ephraim from east to west. Judah will have one portion. It will border the territory of Reuben from east to west. Bordering the territory of Judah from east to west will be the portion you are to present as a special gift. It will be 2,500 cubits wide, and this length from east to west will be equal to one of the tribal portions. The sanctuary will be in the center of it. The special portion you are to offer to the Lord will be 2,500 cubits long and 10,000 cubits wide. I'm sorry, not 2,500, 25,000. And this will be sacred portion for the priest. It will be 25,000 cubits long on the north side, 10,000 cubits on the west side, 10,000 cubits wide on the east side, and 25,000 cubits long on the south side. In the center of it will be the sanctuary of the Lord. This will be for the consecrated priests, the Zadokites, who are faithful in serving me and did not go astray as the Levites did when the Israelites went astray. It will be a special gift to them from the sacred portion of the land, a most holy portion, bordering the territory of the Levites alongside the territory of the priests. The Levites will have an allotment of 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 cubits wide. Total length will be 25,000 cubits, and its width will be 10,000 cubits. They must not sell or exchange any. Okay, yeah. And this is the last chapter in Ezekiel, and in Daniel, that's when the exile begins. And so this is just extra information to set the tone. The end of Ezekiel lets you know that the city was called The Lord is There. But this is kind of Ezekiel 48, and just to go a little more in depth, this is the outcome of the separation. The chapter itself is called The Division of the Land. It's the final idealized division of the promised land among the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 elders, highlighting the restoration, the equal inheritance, and God's abiding presence. And that's why they named the city the Lord there. The elevated district is for the temple of the priests, Zadok's sons, and Levites, emphasized on the holiness in the central place of the Lord. And the holy district is where everyone was going to worship. This is a designated place of worship. And so, quite similar to what Jacob had done, Ezekiel, the story of Ezekiel shows you the restoration of a land, because what you hope for is not something you made up. And typically, the blueprint for the Lord that he placed, he always showed us what it looked like. And so when they regathered and reunited the 12 tribes, it was something to be wondered. It was something to be glorified. And the fulfillment of God's promises, I just, there is no end. There is no end to his mercy. There's no end to his love. He just is what he is. And so even if you look at the allotment according to this town, according to the city, according to what God had told them to separate the city where, God deals with the heavenly measurement. And so what to do when you're treated badly, right? So he said, surely God is in this place. After the encounter that he had with God, then he met the love of his life, Rachel. However, since he wanted to marry the younger of the daughters, he was hired to work off the debt and pay for her hand in marriage. In 7 years' time, which was like 7 days for him, since he loved her so much, when he finally reached that point, he had helped Laban a great deal working for him on his farm. And upon receiving the wife, he realized the eldest daughter was given instead of the youngest. And so he was then deceived by Laban. While he married the first wife, he said, you deceived me now, when he got, tricked by Laban. And Laban's excuse was that, we don't do that. We want you to have the oldest daughter first. And if you work for me 7 more years, then I can give you her. And so he also gave her a serving girl. And so that was, Bilhah. And he decided to stay with her, of course, because he still wanted to be with Rachel. Now, as a gift, Bilhah was one of the first servant that came to work with him. And so Reuben was the first child of Jacob that he had with Leah. All of those years, they were having child after child. Sometimes when he finally married Rachel, he still didn't have children with her. He ended up having, she even had a servant girl, and he ended up having child with a servant girl. And, at this time, Leah had a lot more children, and she felt more valuable, right? All of those years, having competed back and forth with her sister for the number of children they can give to Jacob. Everyone had a decent number of children, right? But it was a huge family by then. So finally, after praying, Rachel was able to have Jacob's child. This child was named Joseph. And as Laban knew that he now wanted to leave, after having this huge flock, after he took care of his flock, Jacob did all these things to help Laban. And he had him as a slave for 14 years because he married both of his daughters. He tamed the flock, he kept the flock, okay? All of those years. As a gift, he was going to send off the speckled flock to Jacob. Now, this was going to be a gift. However, Jacob made it so that his flock was more healthy than Laban's flock. And Laban was a very rich man because Jacob was blessed by the Lord. Although his proximity, he was working for labor. His whole land was greatly multiplied because of Jacob. He really made Laban rich. Even though a majority of the good flock was going to Jacob, at this time, Laban was rich, and he's used to that money. He noticed that Jacob was very good with the flock, but they seen it as something negative. The children of Laban, the other children, and they sought him out, and they said, hey, he pretty much thinks that he owns you. He wants you. He's parading around. They had a tirade against Jacob. They really hated Jacob. And now all this time, he's like, you've changed my wage multiple times. Pretty much Laban just started becoming very oppressive, and the people didn't care for him. So the good favor on Jacob's life is the only reason why Laban's house was what it was, because God loved Jacob. Since God loved Jacob and Jacob works for Laban, Laban was now benefiting and profiting from God's love. Even though he did witchcraft and he had, idols in his home, he tried to hold Jacob there with all of the wives and the slaves. He tried to make Jacob stay. He said, no, please come and stay. Even after he kept lowering his wages, kept changing his wages. Now, all the children, including Benjamin. Now, Benjamin was born to Rachel as her last child, but Benjamin was killing Rachel. So now his wife, the one that he really, really loves, was dying. Okay. Now, moving on. Laban tried to make it so that he could not escape him, trying to keep him captive, trying to hold him back and hinder him, similar to how Jacob held on to Esau's heel as he was coming out the womb of Rebekah. So it's almost like Jacob is having a full circle moment of what it feels like for someone to hold you back from doing something. However, when Esau gave up his inheritance to Jacob, Jacob was the victor in that moment. But Jacob already had been chosen by God. So those kind of things, I'm not going to say they didn't matter, but they weren't as talk, right? However, because God was on Jacob's side, and Laban was quite deranged. He was quite demanding. God gave him what he needed to move on. Whereas he's doing these things to keep him there maliciously or manipulatively, using this sort of device or way to control him and keep him there, not on his own will, but as his daughters as well. He wanted to have that home court advantage. However, no one can have a certain advantage over you when God is concerned for your life. No one can have you by device. No one can have you like that. It's not that this lady was not loved by Jacob. It's that Jacob was chosen by God, but Jacob chose Rachel. And with all those good things of the Lord that he knew of, nobody was going to hinder Jacob from living the life God wanted him to have. And Laban was trying to chase Jacob as he left them. Now he's getting to know God in a better way, but he just chose not to participate. Laban just chose not to participate. He had idols in his home. It's like if this person knows about God and you by proximity are benefiting from him, God probably came to you too. So it's just like, he did a couple things that were just not of God. And so that's one of the quickest ways to get on God's best side, is that he's very jealous for us, for all of us. And he also doesn't want to see us going into those kind of ways of living because sin separates us from him. So upon receiving that, amen, we understand a little bit more about Laban. We understand, but it doesn't excuse what he had done at this time. But it doesn't excuse what he's done. Jacob and his family, along with the flock, they leave in the dead of night and they escape Laban. So then we understand that as Jacob was playing tricks on Laban, so Jacob told Laban that his pay would be flocks. And he took green sticks of 3 kinds of trees and he cut white marks in them, showing the white was in the sticks. He took those sticks, which he had cut and set them in front of the flocks in the place where the flocks came to drink. And the animals made it when they came to drink. So the flocks made it in front of the sticks, and the young that were born had spots. Then Jacob divided the lambs, and he made the flocks look towards Laban's flock of the animals, which were black or with spots. And he put his own flocks by themselves. He did not put them with Laban's flock. When the stronger animals of the flock were mating, Jacob would put the sticks in the water in front of the flock so they would mate by the sticks. But when the flock was weak, Jacob did not put the sticks in. So the weaker animals went to Laban and the stronger ones went to Jacob. Jacob became very rich, and he had large camels and flocks and donkeys, men and women servants. And so back on the home front, we understand the quarreling between Rachel and Leah. Now, Rachel became very desperate and jealous to have Jacob's child. She, said a lot of disparaging things about herself. And then she offered her servant Bilhah. And Bilhah had a child. She had Dan. And she said, God has heard my voice and he's given me a son. And then Bilhah had another child with Jacob. And then when he was born, she said, I have fought a hard fight with my sister and I've won. And they gave him the name Naphtali. So then she felt like, oh, I'm back in this thing. I'm competing with my sister. This is my husband. He loves me. That's how she was feeling. And then Leah, her maiden was Zilpah. And she also had already she had gave Zilpah to him. And then Leah, pretty much, when this child was born, she said, good things have happened to me. And so she named the son Gad. And the second son, who was born to Jacob through Zilpah, she served Leah. She said, I'm happy, for women will say that I'm happy. And she gave him the name Asher. Now, during the time of gathering grain, Reuben, who was the oldest, worked out in the field and found some fruit. He brought it back home to Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, give me some of your son's fruit. And Leah said, well, is it not enough to take my husband? You also want my son's fruit. And then Rachel said, well, you can lie with Jacob tonight if you give me some of the fruit. And so, Leah goes back to Jacob and said, hey, I paid for you with my son's fruit. And they had a baby. They copulated. They had a child. Okay. God has given me pay because I gave my husband the woman who serves me. So she thought she was being rewarded for having her servant marry her husband. Oh, goodness me. So Issachar was born. Leah was going to have another child. She gave birth to a 6th son of Jacob. She said, God has given me a good gift now. Now my husband will live with me because I have given birth to 6 sons. So she gave him the name Zebulun. Later, she gave birth to a daughter named Dinah. I just want to say, daughters were also treasured like sons. But if you have as many sons as Jacob had, and you were blessed like Jacob, it's because of the word of God. Okay. The word of God is coming alive, and they were supposed to be blessed with this because God had promised them. So he had promised this to them. They would have this. So then God remembered Rachel. God listened to her and made her able to have a child. She gave birth to a son. Then she said, God has taken away my shame. She gave him the name Joseph, saying, may the Lord give me another son. When Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me away so I may go to my own place and country. He wanted to leave. Give me my wives and my children for whom I've served. Let me leave for you. Now you know how much I've served you. But Laban begged him to stay. And then so that's when we go to things we already talked about. Okay. And then Esau got to meet with Jacob. And so Jacob went on his way. God's angels met with him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's camp. So he gave the place the name Mahanaim. Jacob sent men to carry news before him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He told them, say this to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I have been living with Laban and stayed there until now. I have cattle, donkeys, flocks, men, and women servants. I have sent to tell my lord, hoping to find favor in your eyes. The men that carried the news returned to Jacob and said, we came to your brother Esau. He's coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. And so Jacob became perturbed. He was afraid and troubled. Now, we don't want to focus too much on the Esau and Jacob thing. I want to go back to the children. But just know, Laban had to make peace with not being able to chase Jacob down because Jacob left when he was gone. So we understand that they had to escape. They left when he was not there. And so 3 days later, Laban notices they're gone. Someone tells him. And he decides to chase Jacob down and pursues him. However, he finds him on the 7th day. And God told him on the 3rd day, look, you can't say anything good to him. You can't say anything bad to him. This means what? He don't want you to talk to him. However, Laban still pursued him. He ends up finding him, right? So Jacob stops running. And, he's got all these children with him. He got all these babies with him. He already went through the stuff with his, he's already going through a lot. So seeing that, Laban, he acts very coy about it and he backpedals. And he doesn't take any accountability for holding Jacob back, for hindering him. He doesn't even try to kind of like smooth anything over. He just essentially, he acts just like he did nothing wrong. And it's not until he starts talking about, oh, you guys stole the household idols from me. And then they can't find it, obviously, because Rachel has stolen them. And Rachel is sitting on them. She says, oh, my cycle, I can't get up, and she hides them under her. Now, why she had them things, who knows? But anyway, he then becomes enraged. Jacob then becomes enraged. And he's like going off on him. He's like, why did you do this to me? What did I do now? You changed my wage 10 times. He's just going in on him. And then Laban's kind of trying to like, okay, understand, like, I don't want you to do something bad to my daughters. And so we pretty much, this whole thing is over. Laban knows he can't use Jacob how he used to. And so he does kind of try to make light of the situation. But he just has a very interesting take on it, to say the least. But we know Jacob to be like, we know that Laban is gaslighting him right now. And we know him to be somebody that tells you something. However, they won't tell you the full truth, like what lies beneath. That's not somebody you can take at face value. He's not going to have everything. He's going to have his own truth, but there's going to be 3 sides to the story. So there he is, he sees his daughters and his family, and he's just like, okay, they have a dinner, they decide to put any pettiness aside, He essentially is like, hey, it was really a burden. You made it hard for me to live. I want to move on. I don't want you to steal your daughter from me. I don't work hard in your country. I want to move. And so I married your daughter. I earned, my wages honestly. And I was fair to, this fair dealing I had with you for the flock. I did what I should have done. Okay. And so he knew about the gossip. He knew about the tirade that the brothers had against him. And so he just is like, look, I don't deserve something this harsh is how you're treating me. You gave me your daughters and you got all this free labor, and now you don't want to give me any credit. You just want me to stay under you the rest of my life, and that's just not going to happen. It's like, if your daughters are really worth everything to you, why did you go and chase this man down? Why did you go and try to dwell on making this man feel like so down? Why was you so oppressive to your daughter's husband? If you care about them so much, wouldn't you want a man that's strong? So if he was being so vindictive, he'd seen a way to come up on Jacob, and he knew that Jacob was giving out of the goodness of his heart because of God's favor on his life, but he felt the need to exploit Jacob. And so those blessings that Jacob had, he definitely exploited those. Now, why did he feel the need to shift the blame? Because a narcissist always wants to shift the blame. He was very narcissistic. He wanted to shift power, and everything was about him. So when he approaches Jacob with lies, and he has no accountability, he gets quite rude and even tells Jacob so much as that he didn't have to steal from him. When you fall out with people, they're going to tell the world that you have done them wrong. That's just what we know. And that's my take on it. Everybody knows somebody like that. As soon as they stop being your friend, they become your enemy. And it's just one of those people that you just kind of like, you always could tell them yes, but the first time you say no, they never remember all the times you told them yes. And so we know that he was spoiled right? And so unbeknownst to Jacob, Rachel did steal those household items. So he did feel like entitled to be upset. But now Jacob, now realistically, after God had warned him about chasing Jacob down, what would possess him to go out his way and do something like that? I don't know. Besides, like I said, being demented and being deranged, and what possessed him to go out there and do something like that? That's pride, I would say. Right. So we do understand, although Jacob, he ducked and he dodged, and he certain things he made it so that he would benefit, and Laban did not. He got very rich off of Laban's lot, and so he made a way to get the wife that he wanted, as well as have another wife. I mean, many other wives. So I'm sure he didn't want to keep Leah as well, but he ended up having to still be with her and make her happy too. They ended up having a huge family, and Jacob is still the leader. He's still the victor, and Jacob is still vindicated. And even Rachel and the wives, they were all complaining in Genesis 31 about how Laban had used all of the money that he gave them for dowry. He used up all their inheritance, right? And so God made a promise in the covenant with Jacob, and to make his descendants like that, like the stars and the sky. He would have these things that he needed, that promise, and he needed that provision, something that was not going to go missing from his mind. And so when God decided to bless him, that's what God did. God decided to bless him, and they fought, and he wrestled with God. He wrestled with God, and upon him doing those things, all those things from Laban, what we know about Jacob this far in the Bible is something to marvel at. Once he realized all the kind of things that you can take from a person and they're still going to make things shake. We were going to shift things around until we're back on top. We're going to grind. We're going to hustle. We're in our winning season, and there's nothing you can do to take this strategy, because it's an award-winning strategy. Like they say it at my job all the time. It's an award-winning thing that I'm doing. Like we check our resume. Okay. If we're trying to get out of a burning down building, we're going to make haste. We're going to go to a new haven. We're going to go to a promised land, and we're not going to let some person deter us from that. And that's what Ezekiel 48 was getting at. We're going to have it set and solid, and everything's going to be in order, and God doesn't do nothing in disorder. We're not going to let a counterfeit marriage or a counterfeit person, a baby mama, a baby daddy, not going to let someone who's not really meant to be in our lives or in their lives, we're not going to let that person into this original arrangement. We've grown out of the need to let somebody come and trifle with us. Neither one of us want to be here, and we're not going to force something that doesn't fit anymore. And so at this day and age, people, they have weddings, they leave marriages, they get divorced, they get separated, and that's a whole different aspect of what I'm saying. However, in the situation, had it happened this day and age, for the sake of argument, any sane person, in an arranged marriage, let's just say they were in an arranged marriage, they're going to leave that arrangement. But it would have really, back then, it wasn't possible to leave an arrangement. It was till death. And so that's why these days there are a lot of relationships that are broken because of situations that still exist like this, that are contrived, that are just not, giving you waited on God for this person. It's a lot of reasons why you're just not that guy for me. It's a lot of reasons why this will never work out. But instead of you being able to walk away from me, you have to be with me. I mean, I just wouldn't want to be that girl. But Leah was buried with Jacob. Leah was buried in his parents' burial plot. So she still got the rights of first wife because she was his first wife. Now, she bore Reuben and Simeon for him, his eldest children, and had all these other children for him, and her maid had children for him. And so, she gave him 6 children, 6 of the 12. I mean, 6 of the 13, because he had a girl child too. So each one of their maids. It's a huge mess. It's a lot going on, and nothing about this situation was ideal when I kind of laid eyes on it, and except for them staying together as a family like they did, except for them coming out of the situation like, okay, we got this. This ain't not gonna tear us up. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. Even though things are not perfect, and you just have to roll with the punches sometimes. Like I said, that arrangement was not ideal. You get married, you stay married. And even still, somebody should get married to someone who does not get them children. They have to keep God first, and God had to keep the promise in Jacob's heart. So, wow, I don't think Jacob was being used to have those children. I think that they was having some sort of game between the sisters, but I don't think he was being used. I think he was a willing participant. Okay. But those kids, in fact, probably brought him joy. And later we discuss all the joy that Joseph brought him because of the harshness between the sisters. We know that it was a lot to be mistaken, and there's a lot to be taken for granted. Now Esau, as he gets over this whole thing with Esau, he goes to see that he's outgrown living with his father-in-law. He lives this life, always thinking that you're second fiddle, da 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 da. And just to, be honest, he's a fine specimen, and so to speak, that maybe it wasn't clear, but now it's clear. You have that transition, brings out the best of you. When God is showing you something, it's the very best you can have. It can bring out the worst in others. If you don't like the way something smells, it's really going to make you turn your face up. But I smell good. I had the fragrance of the Lord on me. Okay, that's 2 Corinthians. I had that fragrance of the Lord, so it smells good to me. It could bring out the harshness in somebody's life, and he didn't let life shake him up when things got rocky. He kept going on his path because he knew that God was the guide in him and on him. And it's like, it's not about God being on your side. Are you on God's side? It's a better question. Is your actions always on purpose driven to the Lord? it's nothing that's going to come out of you that's not of God. That's going to produce some bad fruit. And so when we understand, Jacob taught the older siblings as well as the younger to be in the farm and just to take care of the house, you get a certain level of dignity in for yourself for just handling your business right. And so I would say Jacob really, really did that. Jacob was a great father, and even still being that everybody has a life, everyone has a past. We all wish we could have done things differently. Not every woman that had Jacob's child, their names were after a theme of how that person felt at that time. And we discussed the meaning for those, aside from Reuben and Simeon. Now, as well as their lineage, when it came out to be, we know that Dinah is Jacob's daughter. And I know one thing about the Bible is that everybody is related. It's like something that everybody has in common is that we all came from God and we all are sons of God. But however, think about it like this: being born on this earth makes you a son of God. In the Second Testament, it tells us that we are all joint heirs with Christ, right? So that doesn't mean we're on his level, but it doesn't mean in a way we are. So it's like, think about it like that. We all came from Adam. We all came from the Lord. Okay. We came from God, the Father, and Jesus. And in Jesus was with God back then. And he had this earthly ministry. People like to argue and they like to speculate. At the end of the day, we're all biologically related to Jesus Christ and we're all joint heirs with Christ. So it don't matter what you want to believe. What's in your blood, what's keeping you alive is God's name. It don't matter your complexion. It doesn't erase your nationality. It doesn't matter if you're a foreigner, if you're indigenous to this country, if you're native to this country. What you bring and what you hold dear is encountered in the blessings that you live. If you consider your treasures on earth, think about how quickly they will dissipate. If you put your treasures in heaven where your heart is, you're treasuring God and you've been key is special and you don't think about physical things. Now, what you will behold is something that is given from the Lord and that nobody can take that from you. And so when people try to wrongfully do things, you have to really own it. You have to really be like, yo, give them love, give them grace. But you do have to not quail or compromise to what you know is wrong or right. So what you could do, you might get in your head and be so reactive that you're going to feel stupid after you've actually said the things that you've thought. What if I tell you your thoughts are not your thoughts? What if I told you your mind is being changed every day? And so God will allow certain things to be said or to be done so that you can make a decision and apply the knowledge that he's teaching you. And so when I do this, it's like you're going to understand you're going to be hell on wheels. People not going to want to fuss with you. They're not going to want to it's going to go chaotic. It's like when you think too much and you're, saying things just to say them, it's just not a good deal. And so it's going to be real chaotic. You're going to wish that, you got out your own head. You may have those moments where you black in and you black out. And so you remember certain stuff. It's like, okay, this is very demonic. This is very not what I'm trying to do right now. I've gotten over this already. Why does it keep coming out? Why do I keep passing it around? Where's this passion coming from for me to be upset with somebody? Why can't I just move on? It's something that you're not saying. It's something that you haven't done. It's something that you're not getting. And sometimes you just have to make better choices and God will give you what those choices are. And the fight to the finish, you have to just pick you. Okay. Now, I know how to say, when you have this victory within your house, within your life, your winning strategy, there's nothing that nobody can do to break that solidarity in your life. That laser focus, like, have you ever had that? Do you know that diamonds, you got to go deep. You got to dig really deep in the ground to even get to diamonds. And it takes a really strong blade to even cut a diamond. And do you know that diamonds only form under pressure? Do you know that steel can sharpen steel? And so it's just so many things that feels like pain and it feels like agony, but it's going to make you a better woman. It's going to make you a better man. Please don't put me through these kind of things, God. Please don't hurt me like this, God. Guys, don't be a victim. Please don't be a victim because the leader in you is ready to roll. She's ready to roll. And so the more that you sit on what you know, kind of like Rachel sit on them idols, you're sitting on it is not doing nothing for you. So a lot of what I read in Genesis, and there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible, they just make me so sad and it made me so sick. And it just made me be like, God, this is not okay. But understand that God's purpose is his ways and not our ways. But in my heart, this is how I felt about things at a certain time. And after a time, I had a different perspective. And so in this moment, if you know it's the right thing to do, don't let feelings get to you and bother you. I felt like I was being punished or I felt like things weren't good because I wasn't listening to God, because I wasn't being obedient, because I was so trying to compromise and cut corners. And I was so trying to avoid what I felt like was necessary. Discipline is what's necessary. So if you're ducking and dodging discipline, I mean, girl, if you go to Proverbs, you're going to feel like a whole donkey. You're going to feel like a jackass, because when you repent, you understand what was wrong. You understand what was being done and why it had so much power over you, because you didn't repent. It makes things to not have such a damper on your spirit. But when God is ready to deliver you from some things, you really just have to fasten your seatbelts and hold on for dear life, because he's going to take you to places that your faith can get you. He's going to take you to places that your own works is not going to take you. And I'm not saying your own works are not good, but don't put them above God. Compensate in your spirit and, lay low. It makes you real easy to receive. It makes it real easy to understand somebody's really chasing you down. somebody's really chasing you down because you're winning and they don't like seeing you win. I must really beat this girl because she's just not great. I want to be better than her. It's just like, you're going so hard on me and I don't even know you. It's like, you can't do this on your own. You can't figure these things out on your own. You'll have to come and you have to go and bother me and disrupt my peace. If you hate me, it has nothing to do with me. Whatever you have going on in your life, just keep it to yourself. Stay happy and stay with God. Get with people that love you. Do not isolate yourself. Get to the other end. If you have drama or trauma with some people in your life that you love, you need them back or you want them back, you have to get to the other side and don't let the enemy keep you out of the house of the Lord. Okay? The perspective that I have on people that I love is like, yo, I love me a lot and I love you a lot. So I can't give you these parts of me anymore, because I'm growing and I'm getting some places. And so these are things that I noticed about Jacob. He was masterful. He always displayed a sharp thinking and mindset. He had the will to use whatever resource he deemed necessary to achieve success. He used his first emergence out of his mother to pull his own twin brother out by the heel. His move was foreshadowing the dynamic of his family would take. He's cunning. While he capitalized off the play to move on his brother's inheritance, he did live up to why the story did eventually turn this event into the picture. Jacob, while he contrived to plan with his mother to steal the blessing of the oldest son as part of covenant that he received as an inheritance from the father, God backed him, but his deceptive play didn't put him in harm's way. He did continuously use his lack of transparency to escape the supposed captivity of his father-in-law. Okay, he also made close with his brother, adaptive. His personality was good on the defense. Sometimes his catalyst was an act of kindness, while others had moved as a while others did what they did. He moved as a protective leader with those in his family and those in his care. He had servants, he had animals, he had all kind of things. He was rich. Upon his reuniting with Esau, he did grow to flesh out his true nature. Some people that's beefed with their cousins or brothers before that they're really close with, can y'all tell me? And I'll just tell y'all mine. When I was not close with my brother, it felt like I was beefing with myself. It felt like I was avoiding him. Don't avoid people. Okay, meeting after he had lived so much life, it gave him a perspective to be quite clear until he gets into the provision, until he gets into the promised land. He had laser focus. He had clarity. While the best approach is always to lead with truth, there may be some conditions upon which you can expose your truth differently. You can expose it how God allows you to. Now, I'm not saying you can lie, but it's ways that you can expose the truth. I used to be so hard-headed and I didn't realize a lot of things. But when I finally started listening and I stopped running from the smoke, I'm like, okay, yo, what's up? I gotta listen to God the first time because I just don't have the time. And so the reason for this word, we're gonna call this word unusual favor, uncanny presence. He built an altar for the Lord at Bethel, never building an offering unto anyone but the Lord. Be patient, for God, the salvation of the Lord, will come soon. Okay. And God, we prayed in the Bible, they prayed for the salvation of the Lord. That's what Jacob said about one of his sons. Okay. He said this about one of his sons. He prayed for the salvation. And so this next word we're going to put through today. Yeah, because we're getting to it today. This next word, guys, that I'm going to release, it is going to include the entirety of what I have to say about the children of Israel. Now that we understand everything about Jacob, we're going to talk a little bit more about Esau and that drama there. We're going to go all the way down to the tribe of Ephraim. We're going to go all the way to the tribe of Ephraim, and we're going to understand why is this so important? Why is Jacob such a talk? Well, Jacob was the father of the nations, much like Abraham was. So I don't expect too much out of this next word. It might be an hour long, it may be an hour long. This one is actually, I wanted it to be a little bit shorter, but I'm okay with it because a lot of this, guys, we just really had to step up to the plate because it just had been too long and I hadn't came to you. But I have at least 2 more videos. It's going to be a finish to the tribes of Israel, and we're going to focus a little bit more on Joseph and Ephraim as well. And then I'm going to do a little testimony, and I really want to get back with you guys because this is superb and I just can't wait. All right, so the first child is Reuben. Reuben was the beginning. Now, Reuben was cursed because he did practice sexual immorality. Simeon was also punished in this blessing. He was greatly grieved by the city of Shechem, where Dinah was raped. Now, the 2 brothers together, they sworn them into circumcision themselves and decided, well, you can marry our sister if, yourself and the whole town become circumcised. In their weakened state, they plotted against the men and they pillaged the whole town, murdering people, pillaging. Their answer and their wrath was their curse. They'll be divided and they'll be scattered from this deliberation. Now, Reuben and Simeon were birthed by Leah. Reuben means behold a son. And Simeon means God has heard or is listening. Now, Judah was chosen to be the leader. He was given the skill of leadership, having clean clothes, and, he would give countenance with the Lord. Judah Now, he had, so he was complicit in selling Joseph. He was also involved with Tamar. Now, Judah had two children. One of them was very wild, but he was, he was betrothed to Tamar. Now, however, he passed. And so the other brother was supposed to go to Tamar. Judah did not honor her in this way. And so what Tamar did is she posed as a prostitute and she made it with Judah. Judah then, he was trying to cheat her out of inheritance, right? And pretty much what happened was it came out to be that he was the father of her child. And so when he tried to get her stoned, they found out, hey, well, you're the father, so we're not going to stone her, so that's how that kind of went. Now, Tamar had two children, okay? Tamar's children was Perez and Zerah. Perez means barrier. Zerah means rising, shining, dawning, or radiance. Okay, and back to our notes here. Again, Judah was given the skill of leadership, and this is when when the blessings of Israel, what they were given, okay? Now, Zebulun was chosen to have marine access and authority within trades. Issachar, a strong donkey, given a good land, and bearing a burden. His tribe, for their workmanship, was praised, but also chosen the lower seats in terms of leadership. He was obedient and loyal, giving them both power over compromise, okay? They chose power and not to compromise. Dan was chosen as a royal judge. He was given the linking to have supremacy in a complex in times. So in the same breath, Jacob asked for the salvation of the Lord to come upon Dan, I'm sorry, to come upon Dan. And he had to have salvation and a clean heart. At times, just choosing to judge harshly, this can make that person violent or hardened. When you always have to make the hard choices, it can make you a little bit, feeling like, well, I can't give into this person, I can't give into that person. I have to choose the hard decision. So it does make you a little bit, firm. And Gad is triumphant over his enemies, okay? Asher will have sustenance, thus hinted at with the bread and royal dainties. Richness also comes from he would seemingly be known for agriculture, okay, as mentioning of bread. Now, what does dainties even mean? Dainties is like nice, pleasing to the palate, sweet delicacies, small delicacies, baked treats, especially served as rich, high quality refreshments. This would be kind of like the Frenchmen, how they have the croissants, they have the puff pastry, the lady fingers in England. It's all kind of fruit dainties you can get, okay? Now, Joseph, he delivered them from the famine. We know Joseph, as most of the several chapters in Genesis, mostly as the several chapters that focus on him, his prophetic voice and the equipping of God, the anointing of God that he equipped him with, like God was over his life. Standing there with them, all Joseph did save the entire country and nearby communities from this widespread famine that had went on. In the blessing, he says that Joseph is bountiful and lush, like a garden by a well. His presence goes everywhere, and his ability was learned in places of agony. This blessing is actualized, and he received the biggest blessing because of his endurance. The crown and everlasting hills is where his strength comes to its peak or its epicenter, right? Benjamin, he's the younger brother. He was blessed as a ravenous wolf, not in greed, but being at the top of the food chain. He shall both devour the prey and divide the spoils. As Benjamin grew up after the grief setting of losing Joseph, he was ever more determined to make sure this didn't happen again. Like Jacob was going to make sure that didn't happen again. All the brothers were going to make sure that didn't happen again. The dynamic of the time was so different that it did not have the same approach. Basically, he represented the future as well as the past. What you do in the past is going to have a little bit to do with your future. So Jake, it's kind of like as a child grows and the parents grow too, you get a different parent out of that parent, if that makes sense. Now, if you sow seeds in a garden, 12 to be exact, and the first two are just not planted deep enough, they never end up getting the nourishment they need from the soil, and so they don't go so well, they spoil. Then the next two receive the soil, but they grow staggering amounts and they leave too much room for things to go either way. The next few grow up large, but in no way compared to that of the previous ones. Those four in the middle, both the bad and the good, choke up the other one in effectiveness with the good ones, because remember, they came in twos. Finally, the last one grows without strain or manipulation. This one is both captivating to look at, but quite uncontrollable. Now, Benjamin's tribe was like all tribes, flawed, very flawed, because people are flawed. His place at the throne was there, as well as the elders. Like in the end times, let's talk about the end times, guys. There's going to be a whole panel of the 24 elders. Redeemed human beings representing the entire church. That's what an elder is. Both the Old Testament, 12 tribes of Israel, and the New Testament, the 12 apostles. They will sit on thrones. They'll wear white robes of righteousness and whole gold crowns, the victor's crowns. The victor's crown comes from the crown of life, and we will also be given the crown of life, but these are the elders, and they're different from lay Christians or, even ministers, pastors. God, elevates us, but still, the people that's in the Bible, the elders from the Bible, they worked very close with the Lord. It was close. They, guys, essentially the priesthood, the royal divisions, all believers are in the royal division, but the priestly divisions was carved out of these 24 men's lives. So the 12 apostles, the 12 brothers. Make sense? Perfect. And finally, the last one, okay, yeah, not that part. His place at the throne was there with all the elders in the end times. They will all have a seed. No one can take the place of that bow that is like Joseph. A bow is like a really thick branch, not like a bush, but like a tree branch that's really thick. There's a kid story about a baby swinging on a bow, in the branch, the branch breaks and the baby falls, right? That's just like, it's not like it's not a measly branch. It's a very strong branch. Okay. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the favoritism that led to Joseph being in prison. Joseph was prophetic, but he didn't know kind of like what to do about his dreams. He just knew that he was excited and he wanted to tell people. You guys ever had this moment of your life where you was excited and you wouldn't tell that person and that person won't happy for you? And you're just like, how you don't understand how this is great for me? Joseph had this every day in his own home. And so him being such a prodigy, it was fresh and new. Jacob seen that in him, but his brothers was really, jealous of him. So they wanted, to be in control because they were elder, but at the same time, they didn't own the position of elder. They didn't really fall into their age and say, oh yeah, this is because I'm doing this in life, or I'm a good person, or I'm successful because of my age. No, with age, you should learn how to get it how you live. But Jacob, being younger, didn't know the ropes. So they knew that they could use this to his disadvantage. However, Joseph didn't know parts that they knew, but he knew parts that they will never have to know. He was set apart, just like Esau was not favored over Jacob. So Jacob was able to steal the throne from him because he was already chosen. And simply put, Joseph was going to elevate Jacob in the same way that he was elevated, and that's just how it came to be. He was there, same level as Prince. This man, was sold into slavery because he was just so insufferable to them, and they put him in that pit and they wanted to kill him. And some of the brothers spoke up and some of them said, oh, let's just sell him. And that doesn't make it better, but at least he was alive. And so he got to Egypt and he was a servant, but he was smart. He was quick-witted. He worked with Potiphar, and he was in the home. Like, he went to prison twice. He came there enslaved and imprisoned. And then when he got out of the prison, he worked with Potiphar, who was very close with the Pharaoh, but not super close, but very close. So he worked with him, and he was such a trusted advisor of Potiphar, or such a good assistant to Potiphar. He was in his quarters. And so he met Potiphar's wife, but Potiphar's wife was very salacious, and she wanted to take Joseph and use him for what he had, or she wanted to exploit him sexually. She wanted to abuse the power that she had over him and take something from him. She wanted to be with him sexually, and he spurned her advances many times. And the second time that he done that, she pulled his clothes off of him, like trying to rape him, trying to molest him. And he ran out of the house. He fled from sin, okay? She's married. He said, what are you thinking about? If this man come in here and see that I'm in your house, he's gonna be mad at me. He's trusted me to everything. Why would I use his wife? Why would I be with his wife? Why would I lay with you? He had integrity. And so integrity is one of the main things that Joseph was comprised of. Joseph had a lot of good formal character. He had very good morality. Integrity would be tier 1. Well, I don't know how I'm going to name these things, but integrity was number 1 to him. He then was dispatched as, the man, instead of killing Joseph, because he probably, in that time, that's what he would have done. Instead of killing Joseph, he just went ahead and had Joseph imprisoned again. And so he spent a long time in prison. In that time, he met 2 other prisoners. Now, he was the leader of the prisoners because, like I said, God was over his life. God was over his life. By the time Jacob, found out what had happened to Joseph, they just told him he had died. They had lied to him. And so they did that to cover up their lies. Anyway, moving on. So Joseph was going through all of this, having to do all these things. When Joseph encountered with some of the other prisoners and interacted with them, they were having bad dreams. Joseph had a lot of prophetic dreams. One time he had a dream that that the moon and the stars, that the moon and stars were bowing to him, and 12 bundles of grain were bowing to him. And so Jacob put it together that, you mean 12 bundles of grain, like 12 brothers? And the moon and the stars, is that me and your mom? Do you think me and your mom is going to bow to you too? So Jacob knew that, he believed his son, but he also was kind of like, where are you getting at? But even Jacob, I'm sorry, even their names are so similar, y'all. But even Joseph didn't know kind of like what that meant at the time. And so I've even had moments like that where God showed me something and I was so quick to tell people about it. But I'm telling y'all, I've learned my lesson. I've learned my lesson with telling people prematurely. And so fast forward.